everybody, and welcome back to Tenza Motorsports. Today we're going to be putting a Linux system in the BMW F30. This is my wife's daily driver. This is an iDrive replacement. It does Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is really cool. This one is supplied by AutoABC. We'll get into that in just a moment. Before we do, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Like if you enjoy this type of content. Also make sure to check us out on Instagram, Tenza_Motorsports. We do giveaways. Right now we're doing 2 E46 M3 steering wheels. Really excited to get that done. Those should be announced fairly soon. But back to the screen, this will be replacing the, I think it's like a 5.5 or a 6-inch screen that we have in our car. Originally, it's not a very big screen. This one is closer to 10 inches, and this really isn't that difficult to replace. A lot of people look at the iDrives and go, oh my gosh, that looks extremely complicated to do. On this chassis of BMW, the E90 and the F30s, they are not difficult to do. In fact, this leads me to another point that I want to talk about. This is probably the newest BMW I've probably ever owned. There's so many things that go through the infotainment systems anymore on the newer cars, the heated seats and that kind of stuff. If that were to break, it's really expensive. They're difficult to get to. There's just much more complicated. This iDrive on this car has just enough stuff on it that it looks modern, feels modern, but it's not so complicated that if something were to break, it's like ridiculously expensive to replace. These systems right here, all day long, less than $500, and that's pretty crazy. I've done one of these before on a 2 Series, had a lady come into the shop that I work at as my full-time job through the same manufacturer, AutoABC, funny enough, and this was a couple months back, and she was like, hey, I want an upgrade to my iDrive, and it was basically plug and play. So there's really not a ton of ways to mess this up. This does support backup camera, so if your car's got a backup camera or you want to add one, we don't have one. I'd like to add one at some point, even just like if it was just one of the cheap little license plate ones. That's nice because it does that. I believe it'll also do a front camera, but don't quote me on that because I'm not quite sure on this one. So let's go pull the dash apart. Again, it's really not that difficult. I think you can have the original one out in I think there's only like 8 screws holding the whole thing in. So we'll pop some dash panels out. Before we go inside, let's unbox this. I'll show you what it looks like. And then we'll go remove the old one. We'll get to see them side by side, and then I'll show you some of the features on the new system. So like I said before, there really isn't that much to this. Pop this open. Got your user manual. It says for BMW, this is the Linux screen like I said earlier. And there are some instructions in here. So we'll go through the wiring here in a moment. And then here is, looks like the screen itself. Yeah, much bigger screen than the original. And then that leaves really not a ton left in this box. Couple harnesses. So you got this harness here. Oh, I think there's one more in here. This guy. And then this little trim panel, this goes on the back of this. This will look very OEM. It'll be essentially indistinguishable. Most people that get into your car and look will not have any idea that you've replaced this, which I think is really nice. That they're able to do this at such an inexpensive cost. You know, you'd think looking at the iDrive screens, you're like, oh man, that's gonna be a couple grand to replace that. And again, you can get stuff like this all day long for under 500 bucks. All right, so enough talking. Let's go inside. We'll remove a bunch of the panels on the dash. It's really not that difficult. I'm just gonna time lapse it. And yeah, we'll get the old one out and we'll get to see them side by side. So we got the original one out of the car. You can see how much smaller it is. Again, this is like basically double the size. Now removing this really only took me about 10 or 15 minutes. Putting the new one in won't be as easy because there's a little bit of modifications we have to do to the original harness, and I'll show how to do that real quick. Other than moving over one, I believe it's a fiber optic cable. Besides that, it's really just a plug and play. So let's get back into the car and we'll start getting the wiring ready to go. There are 3 hookups on the back of this that are different than the OEM one. The only one that's original is this guy, and you'll just plug that one right back in. Same as what it was, kind of like this dark purple connector, you'll plug that back in. These 3 right here, the harnesses for this is basically an interrupter. This is going to go into the original system, and this is where this screen is going to get all of its information from. This is also where you're going to add your backup camera, if you've got all that. This right here said to remove this depending on your system. I can't remember. I couldn't seem to figure it out. CIC. What I'm going to basically do is I'm going to get all this plugged in. I'm going to play the stereo system, and it was saying if there's like something to do with like distortion, you just would unplug this. So we're going to leave it plugged in for right now. And then there's your auxiliary out. So yeah, we're going to remove this harness off the back of the CD player. And in here is your fiber. It's right here at the bottom. It's these 2. I'm going to remove that and move it over into this harness here. Now, as you can see, you can't put it on this side. You can only put it on that side. So we're going to remove it from there, put it onto this side. And then this, like I said, it'll plug into there, and then it'll plug into the back of where that was originally. So again, it's really just an interrupter so that we can get all of the information that this needs to have to run. Let's go over these plugs real quick here. So the larger one is for this, which every car will have. One of the smaller ones is for these USBs. I'm not sure exactly where we're going to be running these 2, but for right now we're just going to run them down into the center console. And then the third one is if your car doesn't have the iDrive control right here, they actually sell ones that will add this. So if your car just didn't come with any iDrive or nothing and you want to add that, they sell this as a kit, and then that's what plugs into this other one. So nothing super crazy. Yeah, that's the most complicated thing about it is undoing that, putting it in this, and then just plugging everything in and then putting it all back together. One thing I do remember about when I put this in the 2 series is it is a little bit tight back in here. So be careful about shoving wires and harnesses around. It's going to be a little bit tight, but other than that, you just kind of, as you go to put this in, you'll just kind of want to slowly rock it back and forth and make sure that you're not jamming wires or breaking connections. All right, so the head unit is in fully now. One downside to this head unit, if you do not have the Bluetooth to begin with, so we could make phone calls, but we couldn't listen to any music or anything like that. We had to use the auxiliary port, and what that led us to do was buying one of these. So we ended up buying one of these, and then you could plug this right into the USB port that was right next to it, and then you could run auxiliary. There's an auxiliary out that goes back into the car, and that's how, so like if you're on CarPlay, that's how you're listening to music, is through the aux port. So in order not to have, because for some reason BMW has them just sticking straight up out of your center console, in order to not have that sitting there, I actually disconnected the aux port, dropped it out the bottom of the little plastic mount, and then I ran electrical tape and then tucked everything underneath there. So that was the only thing that was a little bit weird beyond just, you know, putting in that harness and hooking everything up and putting it back together. So let's go through some features here real quick. So it is a touch screen. If you want to go to your OEM car information, so this right here would put you back in just standard BMW stuff. It's pretty cool if you open the door. Let's see if it'll do it. There you go. See, if you open the door, it knows which door's open, and it'll actually do the back doors as well. If you want to get out of this, you just touch it, and it'll go back to this. Nothing on this system here is actually touch. It's all ran by your iDrive knob controls. So if you want to get out of this, you touch it, CarPlay, and then all this is touch screen again. You know, all the menus and things like that. If you go into, let's see here, if you go into CarPlay, if you want to get out of CarPlay, you got to go to Car Home. So for a while there, we couldn't seem to figure out how to get out of this, and you hit Car Home, and that's it. I think it looks absolutely fantastic in here. I'm happy with it. One thing that I am happy with, older touchscreens, really cheap ones back, you know, 5-10 years ago, you had to really press on them. This is very modern feeling. This doesn't lag or hang around or anything like that. It's very smooth feeling, and I appreciate that. And I really like that no matter what, you can use this knob. So even if you're in the touchscreen areas, if you want to use your iDrive controls, you can do that as well. So I really appreciate everybody so much for watching. Here's another side-by-side. It makes the dash look 10 years newer, which, you know, honestly, for the price is just a killer deal. I'm planning on doing a follow-up video. Maybe we'll do like 6 months or a year and just kind of see how well this has been holding up. It's so easy to get at this. If this were to have issues and I had to go back, I could literally have this pulled down and this removed and all put back together in like 15 or 20 minutes. This piece comes off, and then there's just some screws. This panel right here clicks down, and I mean, it's so easy. These cars, this is probably one of the easiest BMWs I've ever worked on in terms of pulling the dash apart. So, all right, thanks everybody so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.
Bam!